Hello friends, I'm Tortoise and welcome to my new course on building APIs with FastAPI. So before starting our main topic, if you want to support me, you can support me on my Patreon page. I have added the link in the video description. Now this course is divided into three parts. In the first part, we're going to build our APIs using regular function, and we are using ORM SQL Alchemy. Now in the second part, we're going to use asynchronous functionality with encoded databases library and core SQL Alchemy. We're going to create our user and registration system. Also, we want to talk about GWT token and protecting our routes. And in the third part, we are going to build our APIs using Tortoise ORM library. Now, if you want the table of content, you can just check the video description. I have added a complete table of content for this course. Now, let's get started. Alright guys, now let's create our first API in Python. Now when it comes to Python, there are different options and frameworks that you can use, for example for building APIs and for building full stack websites. Now we have Django and Flask. They are the most popular web frameworks that you can use it for building, for example REST APIs, and also for building full stack web development. Now I already have different videos on Django and Flask, and also integration of these frameworks with the front-end libraries, like for example React.js or Vue.js or React Native mobile front-end. Now I have already added the links in the video description. If you're interested, you can check those links. Now we are going to learn about FastAPI. So you can see that this is the website of the FastAPI, and it is a framework. So FastAPI framework is a high performance, easy to learn, fast to code, and ready for production framework for building APIs. Now they have, if you see, there are cool features, and it's a modern, fast, high-performance web framework for building APIs with Python 3.6. Now you should have this version of Python and above, based on a standard Python type hints. Now you can see the key features, different features that it has, and also if you come down, now these are the different thoughts and opinions about this web framework. And you can see that this is the requirements. We need this Python and above. Also, you can see that FastAPI stands on the shoulders of two libraries. Now the first one is Starlet. It's also another web framework for Python, and they're using this for the web parts. And also we have Pydantic. Now it's used for the data parts. And now we need to install this. So for right now we need to install two libraries. So the first one is FastAPI, and also you can see that you will also need an ASGI server for production, such as UVcorn or HyperCore. Now first we need to install FastAPI, and so I already have created a virtual environment, and now I'm going to install this. And also for the web server, we need to install UVcorn. So we can just grab this from here and pip install UVcorn. Let me just copy this. Okay, now FastAPI is installed, and let's install UVcorn. Okay, now the installation has been completed, and we are going to create our first example. So first we are going to create a new folder in here. I'm going to just so now let me just create a new folder in this section, and in here we can just say, okay, now I have added a new folder at name of FastAPI, and here I'm going to create a new folder at name of API. So now let's create a new file, and we are going to just create our first example. So I'm going to just create a new file, and I want to just call it main.py file. Okay, now in the main.py file, so first we need to import FastAPI, and we can, if you see, they have a simple example in here. Now first we need to import from FastAPI. We are going to import API. like this. So import FastAPI, sorry, FastAPI. So from FastAPI, import FastAPI. Now let's create the object of this FastAPI. So we can just say app FastAPI like this. Now we're going to create a simple get route. So we can just say at app.get, and for right now, and okay, now this is our we can say view function, and now let's create our this is our route, and now let's create our view function. Now they have a name for this now in the FastAPI. Let me just first try it. For example, this is my index. For right now, I'm going to just give it index, and I want to just return message, and also we have hello world. Okay, so now we have created our simple main.py file. Now we need to run this. So I've already said that you can use we can use UV-corn, or we can say UVI-corn. So if you see their documentation, and if I come down, you can see that we can use UVI-corn. Now let's just use it in here. And okay, now the first thing is that we are in the Python API thoughts. Now let's just change the directory to the FastAPI folder. Now in here we can use UV, and let me just show you, and we can just say UVI-corn, or we can say UV-corn, and after this you need to give your file name. So because my file is in the API, so we can just say API.main. So my file name is main, and after that we need to use this app. So we can just say app, and also because we want to add a reload functionality, so we can just say reload. Now after this, hit enter, and now we are waiting for this. Okay, now you can see that it is running on this local host and on this port. Now let's just open this in here. Let me just go to the local host, port 8000, and we should see, now you can see that we are receiving message hello world. Now if we test this in the Postman, and this is a get route, and we can just send this, you will see that we are receiving hello world also in the Postman. Now we'll not use this Postman a lot, because with a FastAPI you can use Swagger UI, and you can just test your endpoints and also APIs. So now you can see that we are receiving a message hello world. Now also if you see their documentation, now you can use also async, because it has asynchronous functionality. For example, we can just say like this, and there's no problem, you can just use it, and you can just use async dev index, and if you check, the result will be the same, but you can use asynchronous functionality with a FastAPI. So now, so you can name it, like for example this is route. For example, if you're from Django background, so you can say that this is route and this is view function, and there is no problem. Now in the FastAPI they have different concepts for this. Now if I come down, so you can see we have imported FastAPI, and after that you need to create the app instance, and now you can see that for this we can call it path operation decorator. For example, at app.get, now for this we can say that path operation decorator, and for the function we can say that it's path operation function like diff route, and after that run the development server like UVI-corn, and after that reload. So now like this you can create your first simple API in FastAPI. Alright guys, now in this part we're going to learn that how you can pass path parameters in your router paths, and also we'll learn that how you can use docs from FastAPI and how you can integrate or interact with the Swagger UI. Now if you see the documentation of FastAPI, so you can declare path parameters or variables with the same syntax used by Python format strings. Now For example, you have a route. For example, you have some data from the database and some articles from the database, and you want to get specific articles. Now, for example, I want to get first article, second article, or third article. Now, for that, you can use path parameters. So let me just create my new route. So I can just say get, and this should be articles route. And in here I can just say div get article, so you can use async, but I'm going to just use the regular function. Now, and here I'm going to just return, and I can just say, so we can say article and article ID. Okay, so this is the new route that we have created. And so for right now, if I go to the articles, let me just go to the articles. And you can see that I'm seeing the article and article ID. For example, if I give articles, for example, article 1, I want to get article 1, and you can see that it's telling me detail not found. Or if we say article 2, details not found. Now, for this, what we want to do is we can pass path parameters in here. So we can just say we want to get the article according to the specific ID that will be passed on the path. And in here also you need to add ID. Now, the value of the path parameter that we have in here, so for example ID, this will be passed to our function as the argument ID, as we have in here. Now in here we can just say and we can add ID in here. So we are going to just returning the ID. Now let's just now check this. So if I go to the now you can see that we're receiving article 2. If I say article 3, so this is article 3, and if I say article 4, this is article 4. Also, you can declare the type of the parameter. Now for right now, if you see in here, you can see that article, and you can see that we are receiving ID as a string. So you can see ID 4. If I say ID 2, we are receiving the ID as a string. Now we need to change this. We want integer ID. Now for this we can use type conversion in FastAPI. So we can declare the type of the path parameter in the function. So we have path parameter ID, and we can specify the type in our function. For example, in here I want it should be integer ID. So let me before this show you one thing. Now for right now, if I add without, for example, ID, if I add another integer, for example, like any Slack, so how to make API, and you can see that I'm not receiving any error, because by default FastAPI accept this as integer, accept the path parameter as integer. Now if we want, we can use type conversion for converting of this. Now in here we can say, for example, ID to integer. Now this time if I for example say how to make API, and if I refresh this, you can see that I am receiving error, and it's telling that we are receiving a message value is not a valid integer, and we have a type error dot integer. Now if I add an integer, for example article 2, I'm not receiving any error, and you can see this time we are not receiving string, but we are receiving integer. Now we can test this with the postman. So in here, if I say for example article 2, now you can see that we are receiving article 2 in here, article and also 2. Now as I've already said, that there's docs and also Swagger UI that you can use it in FastAPI. Now if you come down in the FastAPI documentation, so now you can see and where is it? Let me just check this. So you can see that in here we have a nice FastAPI Swagger UI. Now how you can get access to this? So anywhere in here we can just say docs like this, and now you can see that we are receiving FastAPI Swagger UI, and in here you can see that we have two routes. The first route is our index route that we have already specified in here, And our second route is, you can see that this is that we can get the article according to the specific ID. So if I click on this, you can just click on the route, and after that you need to click on the tryout. And if you execute, so now you can see that we are receiving response body, and this is the status code is 200, and there are different status code that you can use. And you can see that this is our message, and the message is hello world. And if you come down, you can see that we have a successful response, and we have article ID in here. Okay, so now we also have get article, so that we can get the article according to the ID. So let me just, okay, now I can just click on this get. So now you can see in here we are receiving ID, and it's required, and we need to give this. So for example, if I execute this without giving the ID, I will receive an error. You can see that I'm receiving error that you need to give the ID in here. So for example, I'm going to give ID 3, and if I execute, now you can see that we are receiving, so you can see that this is the requested URL, and this is the code, response code, and with the response body is article ID 3. Also, there is an alternative. If you see the documentation, and you can see that OpenAPI, are there many also, so you can see because of this, FastAPI itself provides an alternative API documentation using redoc. So you will not use this redoc match, but you can, if you want, you can also use it. So for example, in here we can just say redoc, and now I'm waiting for this, and it's loading. Okay, now you can see that we have our index route in here, we have our get article route, and you can see that we can access this according to the ID and path parameter, and for the index we don't have anything in here. Now we have saw path parameters. Let's talk about the query parameters. Now it's telling that when you declare other function parameters that are not part of the path parameters, they are automatically interpreted as query parameters. Now if you see in our example, it's telling that if we have some parameters that are not in our path, that's called query parameters. Now in our example, you can see that in here we have ID, and we have the ID in our path, and after that we are passing the ID to our function, to our view function. Now when we create some parameters that are just added in our function or view function and that are not passed in the path in here, that's called query parameter. For example, in here if I create a Slack, for example, it's just like an example. Now you can see that it's not passed in our path in here. Now this is accepted as query parameter in FastAPI. Now let's create an example in here. So for this, okay, in here I'm going to just create some data, some dummy data, and I can just say data, and I want to create an array or a list of some data, and I can just say title. So we can say first title, and let me just copy this. So we have some data, some 3 dummy data in here, so second title and also third title. Now in here we can pass our query parameters. As we have already said, that query parameters are not the part of the path parameter. Now we can just say, for example, skip to 0, or even we can just create a new, because I think we don't need the ID in here, and we can just create another. I'm going to just remove this, and okay, no problem, we can remove this ID from here, and now we can just remove this ID because we don't need this ID. Let me just remove this return for right now. Okay, now in here we can just add, for example, also we need to remove the ID from here because we don't need. I'm going to just add a skip, and so you can give the type. For example, for the skip I want it should be integer, so I'm going to just give it 0, so the default value is to 0. And also I can give limit, and in here I can add the type or type conversion in here, and I want it should be integer, and I'm going to just give it 10. Now in here we can simply return data, and we can just say skip class limit, like this. Okay, now in this example, if you see, we have two query parameters in here, and we can see that the query parameter, the query is, or we can say the query parameter is the set of key value pairs that go after the question mark in a URL, separated by and characters. So now in here we can, if you see in here, right now if I go to the articles, so details not found, so we need to save this, and now we can just go to the articles. So now you can see that we have our title. This is the first title, this is the second title, and this was the dummy data that we have added in here, so in this section. So now if I say in here, so we can just add a question mark, and we can just say skip 0, and we can just say ampersand and limit 10. Now if I run this, so you can see that we are receiving our three dummy data in here. Now if I make the skip to, for example, to 1, you can see that I'm seeing the two data in here, so the first, so this title and also this title. Now if I add this, for example 2, and you will see that I will receive 1 data, and if I say 1, so 2 data, and if I say 4, you'll see that I'm receiving an empty list or array. Now this is called query parameters, so the parameters that are just passed in the function and that are not the part of the path that we have in here. And also you can, if you see the documentation, also you can use optional parameters. For example, if you want to use optional parameters, you can add, for example, this is the name of the parameter, and after that you can use optional, and you can add the type, for example string, and you can make it to none. And also you need to import this. Like this, you can use optional parameters also. Now let's check this in the Swagger UI, and we can just say docs, and it's loading. Okay, now this is our get route. Now if I click on this get, so now you can see that we have default value to 0, and this is for the, we have the skip and we have the limit. Now if I try it out, you can see we need to add a skip. So for right now, if I say for example 0, and if I execute this, you can see that I am receiving the three data in here, title, title, title. Now if I say 1, you can see that I am receiving the two title in here. And for example, if I say 4, you will see that I am receiving an empty list in here. So you can see that the response body is an empty list. So now let's talk about the request body. Now when you need to send data from a client, for example, we can say a browser to your API, now you send it as a request body, and a request body is data sent by the client to your API, and a response body is the data that your API sends to the client. Now to declare our request body, if you see according to the FastAPI documentation, to declare a request body we need pydantic models with all their power and benefits. Now as we have already in the introductory video of the FastAPI, we have told that FastAPI stands on the shoulder of two libraries, so Starlet for the web part and pydantic for the data parts. Now what's pydantic? If you see the documentation for the pydantic, it is a data validation and seating management using Python type annotation. and Pydantic enforces type hints at runtime and provides user-friendly errors when data is valid. Now you can see that they have an example in here. So when we want to create a Pydantic model, what we need for that? So the first thing is that we need to import a base model from the Pydantic, and after that we can create our class that will extend from the base model, and after that we return our Pydantic model in our, we can say, in our view function. Now let's create our example. So this is my simple main.py file. So I'm going to so let me just remove the data in here because I'm using it in here. Now at the top, the first thing is that we need to import a base model from Pydantic. So we can just say from Pydantic import base model. So from Pydantic import base model. Now we want to create our class, our Pydantic model class. So we are going to just call it article that extends from the base model. Now we need to add our data for this. For example, we want ID. The ID should be integer. So you can see that I'm specifying the type, that the type should be integer. And after that I want the title, and the title should be string. I need description, and this should be string also. So we have imported the base model from the Pydantic. After that we have created our Pydantic model class that extends from the base model, and after that we have added our fields like ID, title, and also description. Now what we want to do is, so we need to create another route. So right now these two routes are for getting, because we want to post the data. For example, for that we need to use post. So right now we have get. Now we can just use at app.post, and we can just say article like this, and now we can just say div. You can just say, for example, add article or insert article, whatever you want. And for right now, let me just return article added. Okay. So now we have created our this route in here. If you see in the Swagger UI, okay, now you can see that we have post, and if I click on the tryout, execute, you can see that I am receiving the article added as a response body. Now we have created our Pydantic model. Now how we can add this model to our view function? Now, as we have already saw that how you can add CRUD parameters, you can do the same for the Pydantic model. You can add your Pydantic model as a parameter, as a query parameter in your function. So in here we can just say article, and we can add the article in here like this, and in this section we are going to just return the article. So we have added the Pydantic model as a query parameter in our function. Now if I see, let me just check it once more. Okay, now you can see we have post. If I click on the post, you can see that we have the ID 0, title, description. Now you can see also we have schemas in here. If you see the documentation of FastAPI, if I come down, and you can see that the JSON schemas of your models will be part of your OpenAPI generated schema and will be shown in the interactive API like this. So you can see it will be shown like this. Now if I go to here, and if I click on the schemas, and you can see that I have the article schema in here. So ID, title, and also description. So now we can go to the example value, and in here we want to just try it out. For example, I can just add ID2, and this is the title, and this is the description. and I can execute this. And now you can see that we have a response body with our data. So you can see the ID, the title, and description, and we have added like this. Now let's just try it once more. And so right now we haven't used any database, but we will use MySQL database in the later part of the video, and we will save this data. For right now we can just say, for example, try it out, and ID1 and a string, for example, title, and so this should be a string, and we can execute, and now you can see that we have our response body in here. Alright guys, now it's time to create our database. Now if you see FastAPI documentation, and you can see that FastAPI doesn't require you to use SQL or relational database, but you can use any relational database that you want. Now in our example we are using SQL Alchemy. Now SQL Alchemy is the Python SQL toolkit, and it's an object relation mapper that gives application developers the full power and flexibility of SQL. Now you can use different databases, Postgres, MySQL, SQLite, Oracle, and in our case we are going to use MySQL, and we want to use MySQL. And there are different steps that you need to do. So first you need to create your database tables, and after that database connection, and after creating of the database connection you need to create your models for table models, and after doing that you need to create your schema, or we can say that the structure for the data model. And after that you can just use the database connection in your main.py file. So before that, because we're using SQL Alchemy, the first thing is that you need to install SQL Alchemy. So you can just use pip install SQL Alchemy. So we can just use pip install SQL Alchemy, and you can just paste it and hit enter. And also, because I have already said that we are using MySQL database. Now if you're using MySQL database, you need to install a MySQL client, and it's a Python interface to MySQL. And if you're not using MySQL database, for example you're using SQLite, you don't need to install this library. Or for example if you're using Postgres, also you don't need to install this library. But if you're using MySQL database, then you need to install this. So we can just say pip install MySQL client, and we can just add it in here. Okay, now after installation we need to create our database. So we have already said that we are using MySQL database, so I'm using WAMP server. So in here I'm going to create my database. So let me just call it Flask API, or not Flask, but it is, we can say FastAPI. So we can just say FastAPI, and after that click on the create. So the database is created, but right now we don't have any data in this FastAPI database, or we can say we don't have any table. Now according to the documentation of the FastAPI, now the first thing is that we need to create a file at name of database.py, and in there we are going to create our database codes like this. So you can see that they're using SQLite, but it's telling that if you're using another database you can just use it like this. So for example in their case it's Postgres, and in our case it's MySQL database. Now we have an API folder in here. Now let me just create an init file, init.py file, that I want it should be treated like a Python package. So an empty.init file, and after that in the API folder I'm going to just create another file called database.py. So now in the database.py we need some imports. So first we need to, from SQL Alchemy, we are going to import create engine. So we can just say from SQL Alchemy import create engine, and we need to also import declarative base. So from SQL alchemy dot ext, not ex but ext dot declarative, we are going to import declarative base, and also from SQL alchemy dot orm we are going to use session maker. So session maker. Now after this we need to create the URL for the database. Now if you see, so you can see that, as I've already said, they're using SQLite, but you can change this to another database. Let me just copy this and paste this in here. So now instead of Postgres we are using MySQL, and this is the user. So the username is root, and I don't have any password for the database, so for this I can just leave it like this. And this is the its localhost, and this is the DB name, and for the DB name we can give it FastAPI. So after doing this, now we need to create our engine in here, and we can just say create engine. In the create engine we need to pass our this database URL like this. Now if you're using SQLite, you need to also add another parameter in here. Now according to their documentation, if you're using SQLite you need to also add this connect args, and you need to add this. But if you're using, for example, MySQL and Postgres, you don't need to add that, and we can just leave it like this. So now after doing this, we need to create a session. We need to create the object of the session maker, so we can just say session local, and we can say session maker, and you need to pass some arguments or parameters in here. For example, auto flash, and it takes a boolean value, and also auto commit. So we can just in here we can just say for example auto commit, and we can just make it false, and also auto flash, so we can just make it false. And the last one that we want to add our or bind our engine in here, so we can just say bind like this, and we can add our engine like this. Now after doing this, and the last step is that we need to create our declarative base, so we can just say base and declarative base like this. So now the database is created. After creating of the database, we need to create our models. Now models are the tables that we want to create. So we have SQL alchemy models, and we have Pydantic models. Now the Pydantic models are the structure of the data models, and the database are the actual tables that and the models is the actual tables that we want to create. Now we need to create another file in here, and we can just call it models.py. So we can just say models.py. Now in the models.py file, first from the database we need to import our base. So we can just say base. Now we from our this .database we want to import this base, and after not declarative base, but it is base. And after doing that, we need to create some fields from SQL alchemy, so we can just say import column, and also integer, and we need string like this. Now we can create our table. We want that our table name should be article, and it extends from the base. After that, you need to specify the table name. We can just add it like this. Table name, we can just give it, for example, articles, or you can just use it like this. Now this will be the name in our database, in our MySQL database. Now after doing this, we need to specify the fields that we want. We want 3 fields. So the first one is ID, and we can just say column. So column, and it should be integer, and also we can just give it primary key to true. and also we can just add an index. We can just make it to true, and now we need a title, and this should be column and string, and also we need to specify the characters. So 100 we want to just use it. Let me just copy this, and for another one is the description, and this should be, for example, 400 or whatever you can just give it. So now we have created our database model. Now after creating of the database model, you need to create your schema. So now if you see the documentation, so in here, so this is the database connection, and after the database connection that we have done, okay, now we need to create the database model. So we have created our database models, and there's no problem. We have created our table with some fields, and after creating of that, now we need to create the pydantic models, or we can say the schema models. And you can see that there's telling that to avoid confusion between the SQL Alchemy models and the pydantic models, we will have the file models.py with the SQL Alchemy models and the file schema.py with the pydantic models. Now the pydantic is just we can say that it's the structure, or you can say that these pydantic models define more or less a schema, a valid data shape. So now let's create this. We are going to create another Python file at name of schemas. So in here we can just say APIs. In the APIs folder we can create schemas.py. Now in the schemas.py file we need to import, so we can just say from pydantic we want to import base model, and now we can just create a class article schema, and in here it extends from the base model. And now we need to define, for example, the ID should be integer, the title should be string, and these are the fields that we will have in our database in our models.py file, and the description should be string, like this. Okay, so now we have created our database connection according to the documentation. After that we have created our models.py file, we have created our tables with some fields, and we have created our schema, or we can say our pydantic model for example for the structure. Now we need to add this in our we can just add this in the main.py file. So now in the main.py file we need to remove some codes from here. We don't need this, we are going to remove this, and we don't need this data, and I'm going to just remove this route. We'll create new route, so we want to just leave this app.get, and okay. Now in here the first thing is that we need to just say from database we are going to import our engine and also session local, and after importing this also we can just say from current directory we want to import our models, and in here we can simply say models.base metadata. So we can just say metadata dot create all, and in here we can just bind our engine. So we can just say bind engine. Okay, so right now if you see in our this FastAPI database we don't have any tables. Now if I save this I should see a table. Okay, now let me just check my FastAPI now. So we are not seeing any table. Let me just save this. Okay, now Okay, now let me just reload the server again and close this, and let me run it again. And okay, now I'm seeing an error in here, and it's telling that table. Let me just, okay, now in table name we have error, I think. So in the models, okay, now it is table name. It should be like this. So now we can save this, and let's run our server again. Okay, now we don't have an error, but if you see our FastAPI, we have an articles table, and we can click on this, and you can see that we have ID, title, and description. Alright guys, now in the previous part we have learned that how you can create your database, how you can work with SQL Alchemy, how you can create your models, and how you can create your Pydantic models that we have created. Now it's time to create our first route, and we want to insert some data to our MySQL database. Right now, if you see, we have our FastAPI database, but in the articles table we don't have any data, so we want to insert some data in here. Now we need to create our post route in here, so let me just remove this get from here. Okay, so the first thing is that we need to just say at app.post, and it is articles, and after that we are going to just say div add article. Now in the div add article you need to specify some parameters. Now the first one is that you need to add the schema that you have created. So as you can see that we have created our article schema in here. Now we need to first we need to import this, and after that we need to use that in our in add article. So now in here I can just say from we can just say dot schemas. We want to import article schema, so we can just say article schema. Okay, now this is the first parameter or query parameter that we need to add in here, and we can give it a name, for example article, and it is article schema. After that we have another parameter that we want to add, that is our DB session. Now if you see FastAPI documentation, and so let me just bring it, where is it? Yeah, now you can see that in here we need to create our DB session, and we need to tell that it depends on our getDB method and our dependency. Now getDB is and dependency, and you can see that for creating of the dependency, for this work you need to use Python 3.7 or above, or in Python 3.6 install the backports. And now you can see that using the getDB we can create a session local class, and this class is, as we have already said, that this class is created in our database.py file. And also we need to have an independent database session connection, or we can say session local per request, and use the same session through all the requests, and then close it after the request is finished. Now for that we are using yield, and you can see that we will create a new dependency with yield, and our dependency will create a new SQL Alchemy session local that will be used in a single request, and then close it once the request is finished. Now we need to create that you can see this dependency. We are going to just copy this. So first we need to import this, or first let me just copy this, and I'm going to add that in here. And first we need to import. Now you can see that from database this session local is imported, and the session local is located in our database, and here we have created our session maker. And after this, now you can see we are using try and yield db, and finally we are closing that, and it should be small s because we are using a small s in here. Okay, so Now in here we can just say db, and we can just say session, and after that we need to add we need to say that it depends. You can just say it depends on our this get db, and we can just add get db in here in this section. Okay, now we need to import this session, and I think it's related to the FastAPI, or from session. So let me just check that this session is we can just say okay, yeah, you can see that this is related to SQLAlchemy.orm import session, and let me just copy this and paste it in here. So from SQLAlchemy.orm we are going to import session. Okay, so now this is completed. Now we want to create our adding functionality, so I can just say new article, and we can say models.article. And okay, now in our model we have title. We need to add the title, and it should be article.title, and also for the description we are going to use article.description. Okay, now after that we need to add this to our database, so we can just say db.add, and we want to add our new article, and after that we need to just commit the database, so we can just say db.commit, and also we need to just refresh the database, so db.refresh, and we can pass the article, and at the end we can just return our new article. Okay, so now it's created, and now let's check our FastAPI Swagger UI. Let me just refresh this. So I think we have a problem. Yeah, in here we have trailing commas not allowed. Oh, okay, sorry, we have added a comma in here. Now let's just check it again, and we are going to, and now the server is reloading, and now okay, now let's just see this. So now we can see that we have post in here, and we can just click on this. So now you can see that we have our ID, title, and also description. Now in here I don't want the ID, so this is the structure that we have defined in our schema. So if you see our schemas.py, so we have ID, title, and also description. Now because my ID is auto incremented, and it has a primary key in my models.py, so I don't want this ID, and I can just remove it from here. And when I remove this from here, you will see that I'm not seeing the ID in here because I have removed this from the schema structure. Now if I try it out again, and so let me just go to the post, and or let me just make it, refresh this again, and we can post, and now you can see that we have just title and description, and we don't have the ID. Now let's add the data. I can just say this is my first title, this is my first description, and I can just click on the execute. So now you can see we are receiving a response body and the ID, the title, and also the description. Now this is added automatically, the ID. Let's check our database that we have this or not. So in the FastAPI we can just go to the articles, and now you can see that we have our first data in here. You can do the same with the Postman. Let me just copy this, and I'm going to open the Postman. Let me just add this URL, and I can just post, so we can grab this data and we can paste it in the body, and we can just go to the row and add this, and let me change this to JSON, and I'll remove the ID because we don't need, and we can just say this or we can just say added by postman. So added by postman. And also you can bring change to description, added description by postman, and now we can send. So now you can see that the data is added, and if we check our FastAPI database, and you can see that the second article is added by postman, and this is the description. Now if you see in here, we have the status code 200, but for example, when you want to create a data, for that we should have 201. So for that, what we want to do is to add a status code in FastAPI. So we can just open our main.py, and where we have our this post route, and here we can add a status code. So we can just say status code, and first we need to import the status in here. So from the FastAPI, import status, and so in this section we can just say status dot, and you'll see that for example we have 100 continue processing, 200 okay. We want the created 201 created. Okay, now let's just try it once more, and we want to add another data, and we want to check the status code or not, that it's working or not. Let's click on the post, try it out, and let's just a new title. So we can just say testing status code. This is our description for the status code, and let's just execute, and the data is added. Now you can see that we are receiving 201 response, and this is the response body, and if we see, we will have the data in our FastAPI database article table, and you can see that this is our data. Now let's learn that how we can get our data. Now, so for right now, if you see, we have some data in our database, 3 data, and we have just created our post route. Now we need to create another route that's for getting all the data. So for this, in my main.py file, what I want to do is to create another get route. So we can just say an at app.get. So articles, we want to get our all articles, and this should be get article. So you can give it any name, but I'm going to just give it get article. So now in here we need to add our parameter. So because it's related to the, it depends to the get db, so we need to add that in here like this. Now after that we need to create our query. So we can just say my articles, and we can just say db.query, and in here we can add our models. So models.article, so our models is article.all. So we want to get the all articles, and we want to store that in our my articles variable, and at the end we can just return this my articles. Just simple, return my articles. So we have created a new route at name of articles, and after that we are going to just query over the all articles, and after that then we are going to just return the articles. Now let's check our Swagger UI. So you can see we have another route, get. I'm going to click on this and try it out and execute. Okay, so now we can see that we are receiving our 3 data, and this is the code, and we have our description, 3 data that we have. You can see that this is the last one, testing status code, and the same as we have in our database. and also we have the ID. Now let's just test this in the Postman, and let's just add it in here. And I want to, this time it should be get, and we want to send the request, and you will see that we are receiving our 3 data in here. So now we can see the data 1, data 2, and data 3. So now it's working perfectly. But in here what I want to do is to remove this ID, because I don't need the ID. I just need the description and also title. Now for that we're going to use response model. Now if you see a FastAPI documentation, you can declare the model used for the response with the parameters response model in any of the path operations. So we can add response model in our any path, that's get, post, put, or delete. So and now let's just do this, and we want to just and if you see the response model usage, so you can see FastAPI will use this response model to convert the output data to its type declaration, validation the data, add a JSON schema for the response in the OpenAPI path operation, and will be used by automatic documentation systems. But most importantly, will limit the output data to that of the model. We will see how that's important below. Now in here we want to just limit our data, and we want to for example hide or remove the ID. Now for that, because if you see in here, this is our schema, this is related to the schema, so we need to bring change to the schema. Now in here we can create another schema, so we can just say my article schema, and now this time this class extends from the article schema, and in here we can just add our title and also description like this. So now after doing this, we need to add this our article schema as a response model to the main.py file, so where we have our get route, and here in the path we can just add a response model, and first we need to import that. So from .schema article schema, my article schema, and we can add this in here, so we can just say response model my article schema. So now let's just try it, and that it will work or not, and we are just checking. So this time if I so let me cancel this. If I execute this, so get, try it out, execute, so we are receiving internal server error, and if you see you'll see that we are receiving that value is not a valid dict or type. Now in here you can see that we are querying over all the data, we are getting all the data. Now if you see FastAPI documentation, and let me just where is it, it should be let me find it. Now you can see that it receives the same type you would declare for a pydantic model attribute. So it can be a pydantic model, but it can also be a list of pydantic models, like a list item. Now in here if you see we are getting a list of the articles, so by this reason we need to add list in here. So list, and after this we need to import this list, and we can just import this from the typing. So from typing we are going to import our list, and now let's so also we need to add another thing in here, because we are using ORM model in here, so skill alchemy ORM. Now we need to just add a configuration for that in our schema. So we can just open our schema, and in the my article schema that we have, we are going to add a class config, and so in here we can just say ORM mode, so ORM mode, and make this to true. So we are making the ORM mode to true. Okay, now let's just check that it's working or not, and we can just refresh this, and let's get the article. And now you can see that we are not seeing the ID in here. We have just title and description. If I try it out and if I execute, and you can see that we are receiving the data without the ID. So like this you can get your data in FastAPI. Alright guys, now let's learn that how we can get the specific article. So for right now we have our articles. For example, I want just, for example, the first article or the second article. Now for that we need to create another route. Because we want to get the details of that article. So for that, in the main.py, and here I'm going to just create another get route. So I can just say at app.get, and it is articles. And this time we are going to add ID in here because we want to get the article according to the ID. Now we can just create our article details function in here, and we are going to pass ID in here because we have already learned about this, that how you can pass parameters in your path, and after that you can add that in your functions like this. So now we can just say my article. So because it's just one article, so we can just say my article, and we can query on that. So db.query, we can query on our so we need to also add the db in here because our so this is related on the db, depends on the get db. By this reason we also need to add this in here, and also you can add your type in here. So for example, for the ID I want integer because by default it will be treated as a string. Now in here we can just say models dot article. So we want to done our query on the article model, and after that we want to filter that. We want to filter according to the ID. So we can just say models dot article dot ID should be according to the ID that we have passed in here, and we want the first one, so we can just say dot first. And now we can check that for example, if we have this article, we want to get that article, and if we don't have that article, we are going to just raise an exception, an HTTP exception. So you can use HTTP exception in the FastAPI. And first we need to import that. We can just say HTTP exception. So in the in here we can just say if, or we can just say, for example, if my article, or if not, if my article, for example, if we have the article, we can just return the article. We can just return the my article, and if we don't have that, we are going to just say in the else case we want to add an HTTP exception. So we can just say not return, we can just HTTP exception. So we can raise an HTTP exception. We can add the status code, so status code, and this should be status dot HTTP. We can just say 404 not found, and also we can add a message in here. For example, the article does not exists. So like this, we can just do it like this. And now let's just check that it's working or not. And also we are going to add by default, for example, if we had the article, we want to add a status code of 200. So we can just say status status to the status code. So we can just say status code dot For example, HTTP 200. Okay. Now we can just check this that we have our new route or not, and let's just refresh it again. Okay, now you can see that we have another route, get article, and this is according to the ID. So if I click this, we are receiving that the ID is required and we need to add our ID in here. So for example, I want to get the first article like this. Execute. So we are receiving the first article in here and we're receiving 200 status code. Now for example, I want to get the article 3. If you see, we have article 3 also, and if I execute this, we are receiving the third article in here. And also you can, for example, if you don't want the ID, you can add your response model as we have added in here. So in this section, so this is the response model, and for this we don't need to add list, I think, because we are just getting one article. It's not a query set. So response model, we will check this that it's working or not. It is my article schema. Now let's try it once more. Let me cancel this, and so for example, try it, and I want to get article 2. Execute. Yeah, you can see we are receiving title and description, because when you're using a query set, or for example some more data or all the data, then for that you need to add list. But for example, for one data, you can just use the response model to the specific schema that you want. Now for example, if I search for the article that is not in my database, so 5, and execute, we are receiving internal server error and message. So it is not message. Yeah, it's, I think, detail, not message. Detail. And I think this is built in, the detail is built in, and we need to use it like this. And now let's just check it again. So cancel, and we can just try it out. 5th, execute. Yeah, now you can see detail, the article does not exist. Now let's just do this with a postman, and we can just go to the postman, and articles 3, we want to get the article 3, and you can see that we are receiving the article 3. We don't have any ID for this. For example, if I say article 7, and if I send this, you can see that we are receiving that the article does not exist. Now there is another way that we can do this operations, and the simplest way. So right now, if you see in here, we are filtering the data, and we are getting the data according to the specific ID. Now instead of doing this, we can just comment this, and we are going to just say my article, and we can just query over the models dot article, and after that we can just simply say dot get, and we want to get the article according to the specific ID. So now let's just check this, and you can see that it's simple, so easy. And now if we go to the Swagger UI, and in here if we click on the get, so I want to get according to the, for example, I want to get the second or we can say the third ID, and if I execute, so now you can see that this is our title and this description. So this is the third ID, and for example, if I say the second ID, and if I execute, and you can see that we are receiving updated by postman, and so this is, and you can do the same for, or even we can add an ID that's not existed, and for example 7, and if I execute, and you can see that the article does not found. We can do the same in here, and that's not a big deal because we haven't changed anything. We have just changed the query, and we are receiving the same result in here. Now let's learn that how we can update our data. So we have learned that how we can insert a data, how we can retrieve the data, and how we can get the data according to the specific ID. Now let's learn updating the data. We want to create another route at app.put, and we can just say articles, and we want to update according to the specific ID, so we can add ID in here. Also, we are going to add our status code in here, so we can just say status code and status dot 202 accepted. Now we can create our method in here, so we can just say our function update article. Now, as we have already learned that when you are passing path parameter, then you need to pass that in your function, so we can just add it in here, ID, because we want to update according to the ID. We want to update specific article according to the specific ID that is belong to that article. So now we need to do our query, so we can just say DB. Also, we need to add our DB in here because it's related to the get DB. It depends. And also we need to add our schema in here. So for that, we can just copy this 2 from here, and we can add it in this section. So we want our article schema, and also we want our DB. Now we can just use db.qd, and in here we want to qd our article model, so we can just say models.article. And after that, we want to filter because we want to update according to the ID. Now if we see our models, we have ID in here, so we want to just update that according to this ID. Now in the filter, we can say models.article.id should be according to the ID that we are passing. And after that, we can just say .update. Now we want to update the fields. Which fields we want to update? So we want to pass object in here. We have title and description. We want to update our title and also description. So we can just say title to the article.title, so that we are receiving, and the description should be according to the article.description. So we have title dot update title article dot title and description article dot description. And at the end, you can just return something. For example, I want to just return a message in here, so message, and I can just say that the data is updated. Just simple. We've created our put route. We want to update according to the specific ID. Also, we have a status code after updating. We want it should be 202 accepted, because by default, if we run this, you will see that we have 200, but we want it should be 202 accepted. We have the ID, we have our schema, and we have our DB in here. And after that, we query on our articles. We want to filter the article according to the ID, and after that we update our title and description, and we just return a simple message. Now let's just try it. So I can just open this. So right now you can see that we have this data in here, and we have a put route. Let's click on this. We want to update according to the ID, and you can see the ID is required. Let's try it out. Let's add ID1. I want to update the ID1, and I want it should be, for example, I can just say updated title and updated description, and let's execute. So we are receiving 202. It means that it's working and the data is updated, and also we are returning the message that the data is updated. Now if we see our database, you can see updated title and also updated description we have. And also you can do this using the Postman. So let's just open this. We want to use Postman this time, so, and I want to update the ID 2 this time. So this ID that we have, this ID, I want to update this. So now the method should be put. Let me just make it put, and also we can just grab this and we can just add this in here, or not in here. We want to just go to the body. So we have title, description in here, we have already added. Now let's just say updated by postman. So this time updated by postman and updated description by postman. Let's send, and we should see the updated data. So you can see that the data is updated, and if we see our database, and the data is updated. Now let's just get our data in here. So let me cancel this, and we can just get our old data in here. Let's just try it out, execute. So we have our data. You can see this is updated, and also the second data is also updated. Alright guys, now let's work on our last operation, that is deleting functionality. So let's just create our delete route. So we can just say delete, and we can just say articles, and we want to delete according to the specific ID. And also we can add a status code. So we can just say status code status dot. So when we delete, we can just say that 204 no content. It means that after deleting we don't have any data. So now let's just create delete article, and in here I want to add ID, and I can just say, for example, it should be integer, and after that it depends on this db session, get db, and let me just add this in here. And now we can execute our query. So db.query, and we want to query on the models.article. So we can just say models.article, and after that we want to filter the specific article that we want to delete. So we can just say filter and models dot article dot id. It should be according to the ID that we want to pass, and after that we can simply just say delete. Also you can add, for example, a synchronized session in here, and there are different value for this. So for example, we have false, we have evaluate, so we're going to use false in here, and you can read about this in SQL Alchemy documentation. And after deleting we want to commit the database, so we can just say db.commit, and also we will do these functions. So right now, if you see, as we have already said, that we have async functionality and FastAPI. Now right now you can see that we haven't used any asynchronous functionalities in our FastAPI, but we will do all of this using async functionalities. So right now we are going to just do it like this, that I want to show you. So we can just say db.commit, and so now the route is created, and we want to check. So right now I don't have any data in my database because I have removed all the data, and now let's just post the data in here, and I can just try it out. So I can just say this is my data, this is my description, and now I can just execute. So now the first data is added. Now this is the ID because I have used a lot of data in here. Now if I see, you can see that I have this data, and now let's just add another one. So let's just say second data in here. So I can just say second data, and we can just say my second description, and let's execute. And now the new data is added, and we have two data in here, you can see. So I want to remove this data, and let me just refresh this, And now I can go to delete, so I can add the ID in here, and I can just execute this. So now you can see we are receiving 204. It means 204 no content, and it means that we don't have any content in here. So now this data should be removed. If I see articles, you can see that we don't have this data in here. So now this was using so we have done our CRUD operation using simple functions. Now in the next part we'll learn that how we can do these functionalities using async functionality and FastAPI. Alright guys, now let's create our CRUD operation using async functionality. Now if you see FastAPI documentation about diff vc async diff, now here we are using SQL Alchemy code inside of the path operation function and in the dependency, and in turn it will go and communicate with an external database that in our case it was MySQL database. Now that could potentially require some waiting, but as SQL Alchemy doesn't have compatibility for using a wait directly, as would be for example something like this, user await db.query user.first, and instead we are using like this, we have used it like this. Then we should declare the path operation functions and the dependency without async diff like normal function, for example like diff read user, or in our case it was get article. Now it's telling that if you want to connect to your relational database asynchronously, then you need to see this documentation. Now if we go in here, so we can use encode databases for this. So you can see you can also use encode database with FastAPI to connect databases using async and await. So it's compatible with Postgres, MySQL, and also SQLite. So if you go to this encoded databases, you can see that it is a sync database that supports for Python, and databases gives you a simple SNCO support for a range of databases. It allows you to make queries using the powerful SQL Alchemy core expression language, and provides support for Postgres, MySQL, and also SQLite. Now databases suitable for integrating against any async web framework like Starlet, Scenic, Quartz, and also FastAPI. Now the first thing is that you need to install this. So you can use this pip install databases, and also because we are using MySQL, and for that you need to install the MySQL driver. So you can just use this command pip install databases MySQL. So I have already installed it, and if you're using another databases you can just use it according to their documentation. Now so now along with this databases, also you need to install FastAPI. So I've already installed it. You can just use pip install FastAPI, and also you need to install MySQL client with because we are using MySQL client, MySQL database. Now for that you need to install MySQL client, and also you need to install UVcorn, and these are the libraries that we want to use. So we have already done the installation in the first part of the course, so and I don't want to install it again. So you can just install these libraries. So you can first install this databases MySQL, after that UVcorn, FastAPI, and also MySQL client. Now let's start our coding, and I've created an API folder package. Now in here I'm going to just create a new file at name of main.py file. So in the main.py file, what I want to do is to first from FastAPI I'm going to import FastAPI. Let's create our FastAPI in here, so FastAPI, and after that we need to create our route. So I'm going to just create a simple get route, so I can just say get, and this is articles, and we can just use sync diff, for example get article, and in here we are going to just return, for example message list of articles. So now let's just run this, and we are going to just open a new terminal, and in here we can just say UVI corn, and from here we are going to just use our API. So we can just say API dot main and app, and we can just say reload. So now let's just wait for this, and now you can see started reloader process, and you can see that the UV corn running on this local host and this port. Now we can just check this localhost port 8000. So now you can see details not found because we have articles, and you can see list of articles. Now we can just go to the docs. So docs, and for the Swagger UI we can get, try it out, execute. So now you can see that list of articles, we have a message in here. Alright guys, now let's create our databases, and also we're going to create our tables in the database. So first of all, we are going to create a new Python file, and I'm going to just call it db.py. And in the db.py, the first thing is that we need to import. So from SQL Alchemy, we are going to import. So the first one is column. We want column, and we want integer. Also we want meta data and string, table, and create engine. So create engine. So these are the imports that we will need in here. So after importing, now we need to also import the databases. We have already installed the databases, and if you want to use asynchronous functionality for your database, then you need to install the database. You need to install that, and after that import that. So we can just say from databases we want to import database. Now let's create our database URL. Okay, so as we have already said that we are using MySQL database, now we need to add our database URL in here. So before this, we need to create our database in here. So I'm going to just call it article DB, and let me click on the create. So this is my database name, and for right now I don't have any table in here. So now let's just add our URL in here. So we are going to use MySQL database, and after that the username is root. And if you have password after this root, you can add your password in here, for example like this, but I don't have any password. I can just leave it like this. So this is local host, so local host, and also the database name is article DB. Okay, so we have created our database URL in here. Now after doing this, now what we need to do is to create our engine in here. So we can just say engine, create engine, and you can add your database URL. So we can just say database URL in here. Now it's time to create our table, and we want to create article table. So we can just say article, and we want to create a table. So table, and we need to specify the metadata or fields for the table. So we can just say metadata. So now in here also we need to create our metadata in here. So we can just say metadata, and we can just say metadata. So Okay, now we have our article in here. We need to add for example column, so we can just say column, and the first column is for ID, and also we need to, it should be integer, the ID should be integer, and we can just add a primary key, and by default we can just give it true like this. So okay, now after doing this, let's create another column in here. It is for the title, and we don't need primary key, and it is string, and we can just give it for example 100, and let's just copy this. We want another column for the description, so column description, and this should be 500 like this. Okay, so now after adding these columns to our article table, now we need to create our query builder for the database, and we can just say database and add our database URL in here. So we can just say database URL. So now it's time to add this in our main.py file. I'm going to open my main.py file, and in here we need to import, so we can just say from .db we are going to import metadata and database and also engine. So let's create our engine in here, so we can just say metadata dot create all, and we can pass the engine in here. Also we need to create, so let me just add this at the top in here. Also we need to create our event for the starting and also disconnecting of the database, so we can just say at app.on event. So this is start app, and we can just say sync diff start app, and in here we want to start our database, and we can just simply say await database, not databases but database dot connect. And let's just copy this. We want one more for the disconnecting of the database, so I'm going to just say shutdown, and this is shutdown, and we want to use disconnect in here. So we have imported our metadata, database, and also engine from the db.py we have already created. So you can see that we have our engine, we have our metadata, and also our database that we have created at the bottom. And after doing that, we have created our engine, and we have added our own event for the starting of the database and also for the disconnecting of the database. Now if you see the documentation of the FastAPI, you can see that they are doing the same process in here. So database URL, and you can see that we have on event startup database.connect, and on the shutdown we have await database.disconnect as we are doing in here. Okay, now I have saved this. Let's check that we have the table in our article DB. Now you can see that we have our table, article table, with the ID, title, and description fields. So now like this you can create your database code in FastAPI using async functionality. Alright guys, now we have learned that how you can create your database tables and how you can create your database. Now we want to learn that how you can post some data or how you can insert some data. So in our case we are going to post our title and description for the article as we have in our db.py. So we have ID, title, and description. Now let's create our route, and I'm going to just create my route in here. So let me just copy this get, and I want to change this to post, and this is articles. Now let's just create our async diff insert article. And now so the first thing is we need to add a status code in here. So we want to create a status code of 201, and in here first we need to import that. So we can just say stat, okay, like this. And now we can just say in here we can add, so you can just say code dot http, and this is 201 created. Okay, now let's create our query for inserting the data. Now before that we need to create our article schema. So as we already talked, that schema is the structure of the data. Now it's not the actual data that we want to add in the database. It's not the DB model, but it's the pydantic model for our structure, for our data structure. Now we want to create that, and in the API I'm going to just create another file, Python file at name of schemas.py, like this. Now in the schemas.py first we need to import, so from pydantic, so from pydantic we are going to import base model. Now after importing this, now we need to create our article schema. So class article schema in so this will be for the inserting the data, and we want to just extend this from the base model, and we want the title, and we want the description. So the title is string and the description is also string. So now we have created our schemas .py file, and now in here we need to add our schemas in our insert article. So we want to add that. Now in here I'm going to just say article. So first we need to import that, and I can just say from .schemas I'm going to import article schema, like this. And now we can just add this in here, like this. So after adding our schema, now we can insert the data and we can run our query. We can just say query, and also you need to import your table in here. So if you remember, we have article table in here because we want to insert the data in the article table, and by this reason we need to import this from .db import article. And now we can just say query article dot insert dot values, and now we need to add our values. So we want the title, and the title is article dot title. Also we want the description, and this is article dot description. So now we have created our query article, and this is our table, and we want to use insert for inserting the data, and these are the values that we want to insert, and we are getting that data from our schema, or we can say that from the pydantic model. Now after doing this, let's create we are going to just create last record ID, and we can just say await, so await database.execute. So in here we are going to execute our query, and we want to execute this query like this. Now if you see FastAPI documentation, and they have for inserting, now you can see that they have async def create node, and they are creating the query nodes.insert.values. This is the value, and this is the last record, and after that they are returning this dictionary. So we can just say return, and so last record, and this is our this pydantic model, and we can just add it in here. So article.dict, and if you see in here, there they have some tips for this. Now, so note is a pydantic node object. So in our case it's article, so article is a pydantic article object, and article.dict, or in here it's telling that node.dict returns a dict with its data, something like this, for example text or completed, and in our case it's title and also description, but it doesn't have the ID field. And also so we create a new dict that contains a key value pairs from node.dict with this syntax. So now we have our this data inserting method. Let's just try this, that it's working or not. So we have our post articles, this status code 201 created, and let's go to the our MySQL database, and let's check our table, and you'll see that right now you can see that in my article DB and the article table, for right now I don't have any data. Okay, you can see ID, title, description. Now we can just refresh our Swagger UI, and we have a post in here, and let's just add. So you can see we have title and a string, and so this is our we can see that this is our schema or pydantic model. And now let's just add this is our first title, this is our first description, and I can just execute this. So now you can see that we are receiving the response body, title, description, and also ID. Now if I check my article database, article table, you can see that this is my first data that has been added. Also you can add response model for your this in here for your post method. So for that we need to create another pydantic model in here for the response for adding that in the response model. So I'm going to just copy this and paste this in here. Now you can extend this from the base model. If you're extending this from the base model, then you can add the ID in here. But if you're for example extending from the article schema in, then you can remove these two, because you can access to this, and we can just add ID in here, integer, and that is the type of ID is integer. Now after creating this, now we can add this as our response model. So I can just go to the main.py, and in the main.py I can import this we need to change the name. So for example I'm going to just make it article schema. So now we can import this in here, and let's just add a response model in this section. So I can just say response model is our article schema. And now let's just another data. We can just refresh this and post, try it out. Our title, our description, and let's execute. So now you can see that the data is added, and this is our response body, or we can say that our response model, the description. And you can see that the second data is added in here. Now let's do the same functionality using Postman. We want to test our API, our post endpoint, using the Postman. And let's just grab this, and in here I can just add this, and this is post, and let's just get the data. So from the response body, and I can just go to the body, and we can just say row, and from here I want to choose JSON, and I don't need the ID. And now let's just say our title from Postman, our description from Postman, and now let's just send. And you can see that the ID3 data is added. And if we check our MySQL database, you'll see that we have the third ID data in here. So you can see that we have this data in here. So now we want to learn that how we can get all the articles. So we have learned that how you can post the data. Now for getting the articles, it's so simple. We are going to create a new get route in here, and this is articles, and also we are going to add our response model in here because we are getting all the articles. So by that reason we are going to use, so we can use first our schema in here. So we can just say article schema, but with the article schema we also need to add list, because we want to get all the articles. It's a query set and it's a list of data. By this reason we need to add list in here, and we need to import this list, and we can just use from typing import list. Okay, now in here we can just say sync diff get articles, and we don't need to add any schema in here, and we can just directly use our query article dot select, and after that we can just say return await database dot fetch all, because we want to fetch all the data, and we can just say query to query. So it's so simple. We are creating our get route in here. So the response model is the list of the article schema, and we can just use a sync diff get articles, and after that we can just query over the articles and we return the fetching data. So now let's check this route, and we can just go to the Swagger UI, and we can just refresh this. So we have one get route. Now let me just remove the route from here. This is route. We can just remove this, and we have an error in here, expected, and no, we don't have any error. So now let's just check. Okay, now we have our get route in here. I'm going to just click on this and try it out. After that, execute. So I think we have an error. Let's check. No, we don't have any error. And oh yeah, we have the data. Yeah, this is the data, this is the title, the description, and we have the 3 data in here. Let's execute it once more, and you will see that we have the data in here. Now let's just use this in the Postman, and this time we want to get the articles. Let's send, and yeah, you can see that we are receiving the 3 data in here. So we have learned that how we can get all the articles. Now we want to get this specific article according to the ID. For example, if I write ID1, I should get the article that's related to ID1. Now for this we need to create another get route. So we can just say at app.get, and we can just say articles. This time we want it should be according to the specific ID. And also we need to add the response model in here. So we can just say response model, but this time we don't need a list because it's just one article, and we can just use response model to article schema. Now let's create our method in here, and it is get. So I can just call it get, or we can call it another name, for example get details. I can just say get details. So now in the get details I want to add ID because we want to get the data according to the ID, and this is not ID, this is the int, it's the type. Okay, now let's just create our query, and we can just say article dot select dot where, and in here we can just say ID should be according to the article dot column dot ID. So we are matching the ID, and after doing this we are going to create another variable in here, and we can just say await database dot fetch 1, because this time we are fetching just one data, so we can just use it like this, and we can add query. Now we want to check that if not my article, if we don't have the article, we want to just add HTTP exception. So we need to import that in here, and I can just say HTTP exception, and so in here we can raise an HTTP exception, and with the status code of we can just say status dot HTTP. So we want to use 404, yeah, not found, and we can add also a detail in here. So for example we can just say article not found. So in the else case, what we want, so we want to just return the dictionary of my article. So we can just say my article. So now this is just a simple route for getting the specific article. So we want to get our article according to the ID. We have a response model of article schema, and this is get details, and we want to get that according to the specific ID. Now we can just go to the route, to the Swagger UI, and we want to check this. Okay, now you can see we have get, and for example I want to get ID1, and I can just try it out. id1, execute. So now you can see that I'm receiving id1 in here. Now let's just check this with the postman, and this time it's get id2. For example, I want to get id2 and send. So now you can see that we are receiving this title and also description with id2. Now let's learn about updating the data, updating the specific data. So let's create another route in here, and I'm going to just copy this and I will bring changes to this. So articles, and I want it should be, because we are going to update according to the ID, and we have a response model, so it's article schema, and we need to change this to put. Now let's just create our method, and we can just say update article, and we want to add our ID, and the type is integer, and also we need to add our article schema because we need that. So for that we can just copy this from here. So we need to add our article schema in for inserting the data, because we need to pass some data. And so now let's create our query. So we can just say article, so this is our table name, and we want to use update method, and we can just say dot where. So in here we are matching the IDs, so article dot column dot ID, it should be according to the ID, and we can just say dot values, and in here we can add our values. So for the title we want our this schema, so we can just say article dot title, and for the description we want article dot description. So title, article dot title, and for the description, article dot description. And now let's execute our query. So we can just say await database dot execute, and we can add our query in here, and at the end we can just return as we have done in our posting the data. So we can just return it like this. So, and instead of this we can just pass our ID. Okay, now let's just try how this route that it's working or not. So we have a put route in here, and we can just click on this and let's try it out. So I want to update ID1. Let's just add our ID in here, and we can just say this is updated, and we can just say description is updated, and let's execute. So you can see that we're receiving this is updated and description is updated. Now let's check our database, and you can see that this is updated. And even so now let's just do this with a postman, and we can add this in here. So I want this time ID2 put, and so in the body we can just say let me just say for the title updated by postman, and our description, and let me just add updated in here, so updated. Now let's send. So the method is put. Okay, now you can see updated by Postman and our description updated from Postman. Now let's get our let me just clear this and cancel this. Okay, now let me just get my all articles and try it out, execute, and now you can see this is updated. Also this is updated. Now let's create our last operation, that is deleting the data. So we are going to just copy this and we need to change this to delete. So we want to delete according to the ID, and instead of, we don't need any article schema. So for this we need to add a status code. So let me just copy this and so we can remove this response model, and we want it should be HTTP and 204 no content. Now we can create our delete, so we can just say delete article according to the specific ID, and now we can just create our query. So article dot delete, so we are going to use delete method dot where, and we can just match the ID, so dot c dot id, and it is according to the ID. And after this we can just say we can execute our query, so we await database dot execute, and we can add our query, and we can just return a simple message, for example article deleted. So we have created another route for deleting of the article, and we want to delete that according to the specific ID, and this is the status code, and this is the query. Okay, now let's check this that it's working or not. So it's not working. Await outside. Oh, sorry, this should be async. So always I'm forgetting. So async def delete article. Now we can just try it once more. So now we can, okay, now you can see we have delete, and let's just try it. So we want to delete the first one. Let's add ID, execute. Okay, we are receiving 204, and it should be deleted. And if we see, yeah, the first one is gone and it's deleted. Let's do this with a postman, and I can just, so let me just create a new route in here, a new okay, let me add this in here, and we can just use delete, and let's so first one is deleted, we want to delete the second ID. And it's deleted, so we are receiving 204 no content. And now if we see our database, we will not have the second ID data. Yeah, and also you can if you check, so let me just close this, and we can just get the all articles, try it out, execute, and now we have just one article in here. Alright guys, now in this part we're going to learn that how we can structure our project. So for right now you can see that my all routes are located in the main.py file. So we want to clean this because we will create our user system, and for that reason we need to create a separate file for the articles CRUD operation. Now before that, let me just run my server, so I can just say uv icon, or we can just say uv core api.main app and reload. So now for doing that we are going to use API router from FastAPI. So now this is my development server. Let me just go to the localhost docs, and you will see our routes in here. Now, so for this we're going to create a new Python file, and so in my API folder I'm going to just create a new file and I call it articles.py. Now in the articles.py we need to import our API router. So we can just say from FastAPI we want to import API router. Now let's create our router in here. So we can just say router, and it is API router. Now we can bring our all routes from main.py file to the articles.py file. So I can just grab from the post up to the delete. I can grab these files and I can bring these codes, and I can bring that in here. So obviously we will receive errors because we need to add some imports. So the first thing is that we need to change this app to router. So first let's change this. This should be router, 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 and the last one is router. So now we need some imports. Let's bring our imports from here. Now we need to import this schema. We can just grab this and add this in here, and also I'm going to remove that from here, and I need these two, and I can just add that in here. And also I need this article from .db import article, and let's just grab this list from typing and we can add this in here. So also we need to import database, so we can just say database from .db, and now I think we don't have any error in here, and these are all our all routes. So now if I refresh and if I save this main.py, so in the main.py you can see that right now I don't have any route, and so if I go to the FastAPI Swagger UI, you will see that I don't have any route in here. Okay, now how we can add this articles in our main.py file. Now for this, the first thing is that we need to import this. So from .import, or we can just say from .import articles, and now at the end we can just say app dot router link, or it's I think it's include router. Yeah, include router, and in here we can just say articles dot router. Okay, now we want to check that we have our So let me refresh my docs Swagger UI. Okay, now you can see that we have all our routes in here. Now if I click on the get, I can try it out. I'm going to execute this. So I'm seeing my one data in here. Yeah, I think I have just one data in my article DB. Yeah, this is the third one, and this is working. And let me just close this. We can post an article, try it out. Let's add a new data. This is the new data, and we can just execute. So you can see that this is added, and obviously we will see this in here. Okay, now you can see this is our ID4, and we can get a specific article. So for example, I want to get the fourth one, and I can just say try it out 4, and I can execute. So I'm seeing the fourth one article, and even I can update this. So try it out ID4, and let's just say, for example, update it and update it, and let's execute, and you can see that this is updated. And also the last one is delete. We can delete, and I can try it out. I want to delete the fourth one, execute. So 204 no content, and let's check out our article. So now we don't have the ID4 in here. Alright guys, now let's create our user system. So now we have our article system. Now we want to add another database table for the users. Now the first thing is, I need to open my db.py file, and I need to create another table. So I can just copy this and paste this in here, and this should be I can just call it user, and this is user. I need ID, I need username, and also password. And so we can just say username and also password, or we can just give it, for example, so you can just give it as you want. So for example, this should be username 20. So I've created a new table at name of user, and this is our metadata. We need 3 fields: the ID, the username, and also the password. So now let's just save this. Now when I save this, after that, if I check my article DB, you'll see that you can see that I have a new user table in here with ID, username, and also password. Okay, now let's create our routes for example, inserting the user. Now the first thing is that I'm going to so let me just close this DB. I need to create another Python file, so as I've already created for my articles, and I have added my routes in here, so I need to create another Python file, and I'm going to just call it users.py. So we need some imports, and for this I'm going to copy some codes because I don't want it should be, because I have already described this. And let me just add these imports in here, and we need schema for this, and in here I can just create so let me just copy this. So now this is user schema in, so that we want to insert the data. We have username and also password, and okay, and this should be from base model. And let's just copy this, and we want to add this once more, and this time we want the ID. Even because we are adding this in the response model, and in the response model we don't need the password, but for right now we are going to just add the password in here. But you can remove this, and we don't need to add the password in here. And I think let me just remove this, and I don't need this. I just need my username and also ID and username in the response model. So now we need to import this. The first one is user schema in, and the second one is user schema. And also we need some more copy pasting. So for inserting, I'm going to just copy all of these routes, and we will bring some changes to this. Okay, so this is users, not articles. We have status code, and this is 201 we want to get, and for the response model we want to use user schema instead of article schema, like this. And this is async diff. This should be insert user, and this is our article, and for this we can just use user schema in. So QD, and from .db we want to import our user table, and instead of this we can just use user. So user.insert.values. Now the value that we want to insert, the first one is username, so we can just say username, and this is, we need to change this to user. Okay, this should be user.username. And for the password we can just use user.password. So user.password. Now we are receiving Mastercard with database.execute, and we are executing our query, and in here we want to just say return user.dect. So now this is our route for inserting the data for the users. Now right now we are not seeing this because we need to add this in our main.py file. So we can just open this, and from here we need to import our users, and we can just copy this app.include router, and we want to add our users.router. Yeah, users.router. Okay, now let's just check our new routes, and we can just go to the so now you can see that we have a user route in here, and let me just click on this, and now you can see that in here we need to pass the username and password, because in our schemas.py file we have our user schema in, and in the response model, if you see, we are receiving our ID and also username, and it's because in our user schema in the response model we want just ID and also the username. Now let's add a new user. So I'm going to just say like this, and I can do it like this, and I can execute. So I should see yeah, now you can see that we have a response body with ID, username, but also the password is added. And let's check our database. So not this article db users. So now you can see that we have our ID one and also username and password. Now the problem is this, that our password is not hashed and it's a plain text. Now for this we need to use another library that's called FastAPI. Now first we need to install this. I have already installed it, this FastAPI, and now let's just do our password hashing in the users. So first we need to import this library, so we can just say from passlib dot hash from passlib.hash. So there are different algorithms that you can use. So let me just add this one. It has or let me just add this. So let me show you the documentation. Now if you see the passlib, so first we need to import this. So I think I have already imported, no I haven't imported, so we can just do it like this, and after that you can just use it like this, so dot hash. Now what we want to do is in here, so before inserting the data, you can just create a hashed password, and we can use this dot hash, and in here what you want to do is to just say user dot password, hashed password, and in here, so now instead of now in here inserting the data, instead of this user dot password, we want to pass our hashed password. So we have just imported this library, and after that we have used this algorithm for hashing the password. And now if we go to the Swagger UI, and now if I post, try it out, and this time we want to add, so let me just add it like this, and now we can just execute. So we are receiving internal server error. Now let's check that where is the problem. Alright guys, now we are receiving an error from PyMySQL that it's linked data too long for column password. Now it's because now we are hashing the password, and if you see our db.py, and in here we have added 50 for the password. Now we need to just make it more as we had, so for example 200, and let me just also make this to, for example, 70. Now, or we can just say 100. We need to remove this user table because we need to drop this, and after that we need to save this again, and I think it should be in the privilege, and we can just, or it is, where is it, how we can remove this db from here, this table, not db. Oh, okay. Now this not database, we don't want to remove the database, but we want to just remove the table, so we can just delete it from here, I think. Okay, it's deleting the row. Okay, now you can just go to the operations, and from here you can just say delete the table, or we can say drop this table. Okay, and if we, okay, now the user table is deleted, and let's just save this. And now it's reloading, and we can just check our this article db. Yeah, now we have our user and ID, username and password. Now this time let's just try it once more. I should not get any error this time, and I can just click on the post, try it out. So we can just add like this, and we can just add it like this. Now let's execute. So now you can see the ID is added, the username is added. Now if we check our article, not article, sorry, our users, let me just refresh this. Okay, now if I go to the user, now you can see that I'm seeing the ID1 username and this is the hashed password. Let's add another one, and we can just say, for example, let me just make it 1, and let me just make it 1, and we can just execute. So now the ID2 is added with this username, and if we check our user table, I have another username with the hashed password in here. Now let's work on getting the all users. So we want to create our get route. Now we want to copy codes from our articles.py. So we can just copy this and we can bring this in our users, and we can change this to the users, and the response model is this time, because we are getting a query set, so we need to use less than here, and we can add our user schema as a response model, and we can just say get users. So we need to use our user table, so we can just say query user.select, and we are going to return our query. Just simple. And now let's just check our get route that it's working, and I can just go to my Swagger UI, and now I have get users, and if I click on this, if I try it out, execute, I'm seeing my 2 users in here. Now in here you can see that we have our all routes. Now we want to add some tags for this. For example, a tag for the articles and a tag for the users that I want to separate them. Now for that you can just add that, so you can do that in your path in here, but if you want to add for all of them, you can just add that in your router. So in here we can just say tags, and we can just say users, and for the article we want to do the same, so we can just add tags, and it is articles, str object, so I think, let me check that why it's giving error. Okay guys, yeah, this should be added in a list like this, and let's just do this for the user. So user, and now let's just check that it's working or not. Now the server is running, and we can see. So now you can see that this is our articles, and we have another one for the users. Let's work on our login functionality. So I'm going to create a new Python file in here, and this should be for the, I'm going to just call it, you can just call it whatever you want. Let me just call it auth.py. Now in this file we need some imports. We can just grab these imports from the articles. Let me just copy these, and we will bring changes to this. So it's from, and now from .db we want to import user, and we don't need this to schema, but we want to create our schema for the login. So by this reason I'm going to just open my schemas.py file, and in here we want to create a login schema. So, or we can say login pydentic model, and so we can just say login or login schema, there's no problem, and we can just add So username and also password. So password, and it is str. Okay, so now we can just open our auth.py file, and in here we need to create our route for the login. So also let me change this to auth, the tag, and now I can just say at router dot post, and this should be login. And now we can create our login method, so we can just say async diff login, and now we can add our this schema that we have created, and login schema, and we can just grab this, and first we need to import this like this, and I can just add it in here. So login schema, and now let's just create our query. So query, and I can just say user dot select dot where, and I can just say user dot c dot username, and it should be according to the request dot username. Now we can execute our query. So await database dot fetch 1, and we can add our query like this. So now first we are going to check that if we have this user, so we can check if not my user. So if we don't have this user, we want to raise an HTTP exception. So I think if I can copy from here, yeah. So I can just raise that user not found. Also, because we have hashing password, now we need to also check that for verifying of the hashed password. Now for that we can just come down, and from the users, I think, yeah, we need to import this algorithm that we are using for the hashing password, and we need to import this. And now we can just say if not, and we can use this, and you can use verify method. And so first we want to use the request.password, and after that we want to use the password from the user. So we can just say my user dot password, and also in here we can just raise an exception, and I can just say that password, so this should be found, and we can just say invalid password. And in the else case, we so for right now we are going to just return our user, but in the next part, instead of user, we will return a token, GWT token. So in here we can just say return my user. Oh, it is not CS, but it is C. So user.c.username request.username. And now let's add our this route, this new login route, in our main.py file. And so the first thing is that we need to import this, and it's auth, and we can just include that at the bottom. So it is auth.router. And now let's just refresh our Swagger UI. Okay, now we have auth in this section. So first, now you can see that we have username and password. Now the first thing is that I'm going to, if you see, I have two users in here with a hashed password. So first I'm going to add the username correct, but I'm going to add a wrong password, for example like this, a password. And if I execute, so we are receiving internal server error. Now let's check that where's the problem. Guys, this is the error, line 15, and login user.select.where function object has no attribute where. So this should be like this, select.where. And now let's check. So it's reloading, and okay, now this time so this is my username is correct, but the password is not correct. And now I can execute. So again, internal server error, or got unexpected keyword details. I think it's not details, it's detail. And yeah, it should be detail. And I think in the articles.py I also made a mistake for this, that it's not details, it is, I think, detail. So first let me just check this. Now if I execute, so you can see that invalid password, and we are receiving invalid password in here. So because the password is invalid. Now if I add a wrong username and a valid password, and if I execute, now you can see user not found, because we don't have this user in here. And now if I add my correct username and password, so this is the correct username and this is the correct password, and if I execute, now you can see that I'm receiving the ID, the username, and also the hashed password in here. So now let's just do this using the postman. So now let's just go to the postman and log in. So post and body, row, and in here so first let me, okay, now we need to add the username and password. Let me just copy this. We can change this to JSON. Okay, now if I give correct username and password, if I send, so you can see that I am receiving back the username and the password, hashed password. Let me just try with another user, with this user. And now you can see that we are receiving this user. If I give a wrong username like this, and you will see that I am and user not found. And if the username is correct, if I give a wrong password for this username, now you can see that we are receiving an invalid password in here. Alright guys, now let's talk about the token. If you see in the previous part, we have created our login system. Now instead of returning the our username and password, we want to return or create a JWT token. So now if you see the FastAPI documentation, you can see that JWT means JSON Web Token, and it's a standard to codify a JSON object in a long dense string without spaces, and it will be look like this. So now let's just do our implementation. Now the first thing is that we need to install Python JOS. Now if you want to generate and verify the GWT tokens in Python, then we need to install this Python JOS library. So you can just use pip install Python JOS and it will be installed. So I've already installed it. Now you can see that there are different steps. So we have already done password hashing and we don't need to do this. We have already installed passlab and we have done our hashing password and we have verified the password. So now for creating the access token, if we come down, let's just come down. So there will be something, yeah. Now you can see that we can use this create access token for creating of the token. Now first we need to import, add these two. So let me just copy this. So in here I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to just call it token.py. And first we are going to just add these two in here, and also we need some imports. So we need to import this GWT and we can add this in here. So I think we don't need this GWT error for right now. We can just use JWT, and now we can come down and also so I think for right now we don't need this class token pydantic model. We are going to just copy this from here, div create access token, and we can add it in here. So now this is optional, this time I'm going to just remove it, and also we can just remove this, or we can just remove this too, and let me just bring it in here. So now in here we are going to use to encode data.copy, and after that this is the expiry date time. Also we need to import this. Let me just make it for example 60 minutes, and we need to import date time, and let's grab this date time from from here. And we don't need this time delta, I think. So in here, and now in here you can see that we are updating the expiry date, and this is the place that we want to encode the JWT, and this is our to encode, this is the secret key, and this is the algorithm, and we return the encoded JWT. So now we've created this. We want to add this where we are logging, so where we are going to log in. Now if I go to the users.py or auth.py, not users.py, so in here now in here I'm checking if the user is correct, and if the user is I'm checking the hashed password of the user, and after that I'm returning user. Now instead of this we are going to create our access token in here. Now for this let's just come down, let's check this. Yeah, you can see that login for access token. Now after doing the required things we want to use this. Let me just copy this and paste it in here. So now we don't need this, and let me just remove this. So we can just use, so we haven't imported this create access token. Now also we are going to remove this, and let's just bring this in here, and now we need to import this from the token.py create access token. So we can just say from dot token import create access token, and So in here we are using access token, and we want to create our access token, and we want to create that according to the username. So this is our my user, so let's change this to my user.username, and we are returning the access token, and the token type is bearer. So now let's check this that it's working or not. Time delta. We have removed the time delta, we need to import that back. So time delta. So now let's check that it's working or not, and now I can just refresh my Swagger UI. Now if you see, I have these users in here and with the hashed password. So for example, this time I want to log in with this user. Okay, now in here I'm going to come down in the login. So let's just add the username. So this is my username, and let me just add a wrong password this time. So first let me just add the wrong password, and if I execute, so I'm receiving invalid password because it's invalid. And let's just add our correct password. And now if I execute this, now you can see that we are receiving 200 in the response body, and this is our access token, and this is the token type, and that is bearer. Now let's just do this using the postman. Let's test this endpoint. So we can just say login, and we want to post this, and let's just go to the body, and in here we want the row, and let's copy this username and password. We will change this to we have another username and password in here, and we want to use this. So let's just change this to JSON, and so this time okay, now let me first give the wrong password with the postman, and you will see that I'm receiving invalid password. Yeah, and if I make this to 3 and we want to send this, so you can see that I'm seeing the access token and token type in here. Now we have our password and username system, and also we have GWT token. Now we want to protect our routes in here. So for example, we want to protect these routes against unauthorized users. So for this we are going to just go to the documentation, and for this we're going to use OAuth password bearer and also OAuth 2 password request form. So the first thing what you want to do is to create this OAuth password bearer, and we can just you can use it like this. So let me just copy this, and I want to do this in the token.py, and I can just add this in here, and so this should be login route, and we can just add this is the token URL route, and it should be login. So now we need to import this OAuth 2 I think so. We haven't imported this. Yeah, we need to import this from the top, and we want to import these two. Let me just copy this and add it in here. So after importing this, now let's just use our method in here for protecting our routes. Now we can just use we can just copy the codes from the documentation. So we use this async diff get current user, and this is the place that it depends on OAuth 2 schema, and the OAuth 2 schema is the OAuth 2 password bearer that we have in here. So this is, now we can just grab this code async diff get current user, and I can just copy this, and I want to paste this in here. so in this section. Okay, so now we need to bring some changes in here. But also there are some imports that we need. For example, we need to import depends HTTP exception, so we can just say from FastAPI we want to import HTTP exception. So it's HTTP exception and also depends. Let me just copy it and add this in here. And also we need to import status. We can just grab this and add this in here. So now we have a depends, and I think also we need to import token data. Now this is the pydantic model, or we can say schema model. We need to create this in our schemas.py file. So I'm going to just open my schemas, and let's just copy this, and it should be, yeah, it's token data. Let me just copy this, and I can add this after this login schema. And we need to import optional from typing. So I can just say from typing import optional. And okay, so this token data, token, and raise credential exceptions. Okay, now we need to import that in here. So we can just say from .schemas we want to import token data, and we need to import the GWT error also from JOS library. Okay, and we don't need this fake user because we have user from the database, so we can just remove this, and we don't need this. So now this is our get current user, so it depends on OAuth2, and this is our credentials status code in here. Now if the, for example, if the username and password is wrong, we can just say could not validate credentials. And this is the header is bearer, and this is our payload that we are going to just decode our token in here, and this is the secret key and also algorithm. And then here we are checking that if username is none, we can just raise credential exceptions. So now this is created. After that, what we want to do is to add this get current user in our every route or every endpoint that we have. So now if you see the documentation, and so create access token, so this is our get current user. Now when they're using this, you can see, so the first thing is that we want to for the login we want to add this OAuth2 password request form, because it depends on this. So we can just copy this, and we can come to the auth.py file, and in here now instead of our login that we have, so def login schema, we want to add this OAuth2 password request form, and it depends on this depends, and on the depends we don't want to add anything. So we need to import this from FastAPI. We want to also import depends, and also we need to import this password OAuth2 password request form, and I think we should get this from the token.py, and in here we don't need that. Yeah, and this in here we don't need that. We just need OAuth2 password bearer, so we can just copy this, and we can just come to the auth.py file, and let me just add this in here, and we are going to just remove this. Okay, now after doing this, let's just open our routes. So first I want to just go to the articles.py file, and I want to protect some routes in here. So for example, let's just first do on the get. So in the async diff get article, now in here we can add that current user. So first we need to import that. So in the articles.py we can just say from dot tokens import get current user, and now we can use this. So let me just copy this, and so on the get route in here, on the get function, we can add this, and we can just say current user and username schema. So we can just say user schema, and now it depends on this get current user. So we have user schema in here. We don't have the user schema, so we need to import that. So user schema, and also we need to import depends. So current user schema, and it depends on get current. So now let's just check that it's working or not, and first let me just open my terminal, and I can check that if I have a problem in here. So we are receiving an error from the multipart. We need to install the Python multipart. So if you see pypy.org, so we can just install this, and let me just go to the cmd, and in here I can just say pip install Python multipart. Okay, now the library has been installed, the multipart library. Now let's check, and okay, now this is my users. I have some users in here, and let me just go to the Swagger UI, refresh it, and now you can see that in my articles get article routes I have this log, and I have an authorize button in here. Now for example, if I try to get the articles, you will see that I will receive error, and you can see that not authenticated. So if I add my username and password, so I have a username and also password, and if I click on authorize, now you can see that it's authorized. Now we have our username, password, and you can see we can log out. Now I can execute my query. So if I execute, and you can see that now I'm getting the one article that I have in here. So now you can check this using the postman, and that. So let's check some more routes. For example, posting route. So right now I haven't added the posting route. Now first let's just add this in our all routes. So I can just copy this. So I want to add this for async diff insert article, and for the get article ID, and also we can just come down for update article, and I think for the deleting also we need to add this. So now I think we are done with our all routes endpoints, and we have added. So now if I refresh this, you'll see that my all routes or endpoints are locked. You can see that I have locked in here. So we have saw the get. Now let's post article, and I can click on this. So if I add, this is, so try it out. Let's add new data and my new description, and I can execute. So we are receiving not authenticated because I have newly added this. Now let's just add our so if you see, this time let's just try with this another username. So let me just add the password, and we can just authorize, and now we are authorized as this username, and now we can execute this. So execute. So this is added, the data is added. And now because we are logged in, now we can do our all operations. For example, we can get the specific ID. So article according to the ID. For example, I want to get this article. If I execute, and you can see that I am receiving that. Also you can update or delete. So let's work on the update and try it out. I want to update ID, this ID, and I can just say update it and updated description, and let's execute, and it's working. Updated. Okay, now let's check this using Postman, and we want to do this using the Postman. So let me just copy this, and first let me just refresh this. Okay, now in the Postman I want to get the articles. So now if I send this, you will see that I cannot get the article because I am not, you can see, not authenticated. Now I want to get my token, so I can just go to the login. So this time I want to try this user and try it out. So now let's just add our username, and let's add our password and execute. So this is my token. Now I can copy this token, and I can just go to the headers, and from here I can just add authorization. So authorization, and we can just paste this in here. And now if I send this, so okay, now we are receiving, so response, the status code is 200. Okay, and let me just make it, and you can see that I am receiving my two data in here. So like this you can build asynchronous endpoints using FastAPI. Alright guys, now this is the third part of our course. Now in the first part we have learned that how you can create your endpoints using regular Python functions, and also we have used ORM SQL alchemy in that part. Now in the second part we have learned that how you can use encoded databases and how you can use async functionalities with core SQL alchemy inside FastAPI. So that was in the second part, and also we have implemented the authentication, GWT authentication, and also login and registration system. Now this is the third part, and in the third part we want to learn about another library that's called Tortoise ORM, that you can use asynchronous functionality with FastAPI and also ORM functionality. Now so this is the documentation, and they have implementation for the FastAPI. Now the first thing is that we need to install this. Now before installation of this library, first we need to install FastAPI, so you can just use pip install FastAPI. And after that you need to install UVI core, so you can just use pip install UVI core. And then the third part, you need to install this library. So because we're using MySQL database, for the MySQL we can use this command, and this is the driver for the MySQL database that we can use. And now after installation, we have already created our project and virtual environment. Let's create a new file, and I'm going to just call it main.py file. And after that we need to create another file for our database, so or for our models, or we can say database. So let me just call it models, so I can just say models.py file. Now in the main.py file, let's create our simple route. So from FastAPI we are going to import, from FastAPI import FastAPI, and let's create our app in here, and I can just say FastAPI, and we can just say sync dev and get first. Okay, let me just say get article, and then here I can just say at app.get, and we can just return message working. Okay, so now let's just check this. So if I go to localhost port 8000 and get, I can just go to the docs to open the Swagger UI, and now you can see get, try it out, execute, and we have message working. Now let's implement this library. Now the first thing is that we need to create our model and also database connection. So first we need to create our model in here, and I can just say import. So we can just use their documentation, and I think so. First we need to import these, and I can just add it in here. So we need fields, models, and also from this contrib library we need a Pydantic model creator. So now let's create our model. It's article, and it extends from models.model. Now if you are familiar with the Django, and here a lot of concepts or a lot of code will be familiar for you. For example, in here we are using models.model as we are using in Django, and for example we can give ID, so it is int field, and we can just add pk, so it's a primary key as we have in Django. And also so it should be fields.endFields, so fields.endField. We need title, and for the title we can give fields.char or char field as we had in Django, and we can give a max length of 255. Let's copy this, and we can just add it in here. We want to change this for the description, and let me just give it like this max length. Now after creating of the model, we need to create our Pydantic model, so we can just say article Pydantic, and we can just say Pydantic model creator, and we can just say article. So we want to create our Pydantic model according to the article table that we have, and we can give a name. The name is article, and we will use this for the response model, so it is article. Okay, now let's copy and paste this. We want another one, and this should be article n Pydantic, and article n. So now we have created our class article. This will be our table with 3 fields, and we have our Pydantic model for our response model and also for the input model. Now we are going to open our main.py file, and in the main.py file we want to create our database connection. So we have already imported FastAPI. Now from dot models, we want to import article, so article pydentic and article n pydentic. And also okay, so for right now we need this import, and also we need to import the register Tortoise. So from dot contrib dot FastAPI, we want to import http not found error and also register Tortoise. Now let's create our MySQL database connection in here. And so first we are going to use this, and now we need to add our app in here. And after adding app, we need to use database URL. So we can just say database URL. And because we're using MySQL database, now let's create a database in here. So I can just call it let me just say ORM, or we can just say article ORM. So now article ORM database is created. We don't have any table for right now, and we want to create our models table. So now for the database URL, we want to use MySQL. So, and after that the username is root, and after that if you have a password you can give it your password, but I don't have any password for that, and it should be localhost. You can give the port and also the database and the database name, that's article ORM. And also we can add a generate schema, make it to true. Also we need to add exception handlers and make it to true, and let's just add this in here. So this is our database. Now if I save this file, you will see that we will have article table in here, and with this 3 fields that we have: ID, title, and also description. Now let's just save this, and now we can just check our article ORM. Okay, so I have forgot to add our module in here, and sorry for that. After database URL, you need to add that which module that you want to create, or which table that you want to create. So we can just say models, and this is API.models. So in the API folder we have our models.py file, and we want to create our table according to that model. Now let's just save this, and this time we should see a table. No, we are not seeing any table for right now. So article ORM MySQL root localhost and modules models API.models, and oh, this should be, yeah, this should be, I think, DB URL, not database URL. So app DB URL modules generate schema and exception. Now let's check. Okay, now you can see that we have article. That's not database URL, but that is DB URL. So we need to add our app FastAPI, we need to add our database URL, we need to add our modules, so according to which model we want to create our table. So now we have our article table, and you can see that we have just ID, title, and also description. Now let's work on our first route, that's inserting the data or inserting the article. So if you see in our database, I don't have any article in here, so I have just ID, title, and description. So for this we need to create insert route. So in here I can just say app dot, this should be post because we are posting the data, and this is articles, and also we are going to add our response model. So we can just say response model, and that should be article pydentic. So as we have created this in our models.py file, and we want to create this pydentic model according to the article table that we have, so we can just say article pydentic. After this, we need to create a async def insert article, and in here we need to add our another pydentic model that's for inserting the data, and that should be this article in pydentic, and it will be create the pydentic model according to the article that we have, or we can say schema. It will create a schema. Now we can just say article, and I can just add article in pydentic. Now I can create article obj, and I can say await article. Now we need to import the article. I think I haven't imported. Yeah, from .models we want to import article. So this is the table name that we have in our models.py file. So because we want to insert the data to our article table, so we can just say article dot create, and we can just say article dot dict, and we can exclude and set to true. And at the end we can just return, so we can just say return await article pydentic dot from Tortoise ORM, and we want to add our article object in here. So now we want to check our this post method that we have, and let's just go to the FastAPI Swagger UI. Okay, now we have get and we have post. Let's post some data. I have ID in here, so I think I should also add a pydentic meta in here. So let me just say class pydentic meta, and for right now I can just pass this. Okay, now let's just check once the documentation, and so they have class pydentic meta, and it's used because in here you can see that they're excluding password hash. For example, if you want to exclude something, then you can add that in the pydentic meta. But in here in user in pydentic, we can add a exclude read only to true, and it will exclude that random ID number. So now if I check my FastAPI Swagger UI, so if I click on the post, yeah, now you can see we have title and description. Let's try it out, and we can just say this is my new article. We can just say article title, and we can just say this is my new description, and let's execute. So we are receiving the ID1, title and description, and if you check our, it was article ORM, the table, you should see that we have, yeah, now we can see that we have another ID, and we have an ID1 and title and description. Now let's try this using the Postman. So now let me just grab this request URL from the Swagger UI, and now I can just click on the send, and oh sorry, the method should be get and not get, it should be post. So for the get, we will receive our hard-coded message. So you can see that so in here method is not allowed because we should have post, and now in the body we can just grab this and let's just in the row we can change this to JSON, and let's add this. We can remove the ID and let's just say added by postman, and this is my new postman description. I can just say, for example, postman description, and now let's send. Okay, now you can see that we have ID to title and also add a description, and you will see the data in your in here. So if I see, and I can just see that we have the second ID data in here. Now you can see that this is the second data. Let's work on getting all the articles. So now in here we have get article, and then instead of this hard-coded message, now we want to just get all the articles. So I can just also add this articles, and this is okay. So now it's simple. You can just say return await, and we can use article pydentic dot from Tortoise ORM, and we can add our query in here, and we can just say that article dot all, because we want to get our all articles now. And here we need to add a response model, and we can just say response model, and because it is a query set and it will have more data, so it's a list of data, list of articles. By this reason we need to add list in here, so we can just say list article pydentic, and we need to import this list. So it is from typing, we want to import list. So it's simple. We are just using our article pydentic from tortoise.orm, and we can just say article.all because we want to get our all articles. And so right now we have two data, and let's just try it in the Swagger UI. And now you can see we have get. If I click on this, if I try it out, execute, internal server error, and we have an error, I think. And so sorry, it's not from Tortoise ORM, but it's from query set. Sorry for this. From query set, because we want to get the query set. So now let's just try it once more. So we can get, try it out, execute. So now you can see that we have our two data in here, so ID1 and ID2. You can try this with the postman, and we can just say, and this time we want to just use get, and let's send. Now you can see that we have our two. This is the ID first, and we have the ID2 also in here. Now we want to get a specific article according to the ID. So right now you can see we have get route, but it is for the list of the articles. For example, if you want to get an article or a data according to the specific ID, then we need to create a route that should be according to the ID in the route parameter. So we can just say or we can just copy this from here, and let me just paste it in this section. And this time we want that it should be according to the ID. And also for the response model, we want to use article pydentic, but this time we don't want the list because we want to get one specific article. So we can just say response model article pydentic. Also we can add responses in here, so we can just say responses and responses. And in the responses we want to add for example, if the ID is not available, we can throw a 404 of not 404, yeah, like this 404, and we can just say model, and in here we can add our HTTP not found error. So we can just say HTTP not found error. So responses, we have 404, and after that, let me just add this. I think I can bring this response model after the before this, so you can just grab this and I can just bring this in here like this. Okay, now let's create our async div get. For example, you can say get details, and we want to get according to the specific ID. And also we can just add this so the ID should be integer. So now we can just say return await an article pydentic dot from query set single. So because it is a single article, and we can just say article dot get an IDS according to the ID. So just simple. And now we can just try this, and we should. So right now we have two articles with ID 1 and ID 2. Now, so you can see we have another route get, and the ID is required. Let's add ID, for example ID 2, execute. We have our ID 2 in here. If I add ID 1, execute, I have ID 1. For example, if I add an ID that's not in my database, for example ID 3, and if I execute, so you can see that we are receiving that detail object does not exist. And you can do the same with the postman, and that's not a problem. And you can just say ID 3 and we can send. So you will see that I'm receiving that object does not exist. For example, if I say 2 and if I send, you'll see that I am receiving ID 2 article in here. Alright guys, now let's work on our put method, and we can say that how we can update the data. So right now we have get the details and also posting the articles. Now we can just so for right now I can just grab this, and I need this. And we can just add it in here, and we have our, we can change this to put. So it's article, and we want to update according to the ID. So we have response model, and this is article pydentic, and we have responses. If the article does not exist, we want to just throw an HTTP not found error. And now let's just say div update article, and the ID is integer. And also we need to add our article and pydentic, so schema. So as we have added in the posting, so if you see and insert article, we can just grab this and we can add this in here, and like this. Now we can just say, so await and dot filter, so we want to filter and according to the ID, and after that we can update the data. So we can just say article dot dict, and we can just say exclude unset, so exclude or we can just add this from here. So now, since it's not dot, so await filter, and we want to filter according to the ID. So in here we can just say article dot filter. So await article dot filter, and we can just say ID dot update. Now this should be async. So now we can return, so we can just say return await article pydentic dot from query set single, and we can just say article dot get ID. So now let's just check our updating functionality, that it's working or not. So we have put, and we want to put according to the ID or update. So I want to update the ID 1, and let's just say this is updated, and we can just say updated description. Let's execute, and now you can see that this is updated and updated description. And if we check our MySQL database, you will see that the data is updated. So now, for example, if I add an article that is not, for example, not in here, you will see that I'm receiving error. So for example, in here, so ID 1, if I say ID 3, and if I execute, so you can see that the object does not exist. And so now let's just do this using the Postman, and now you can see that this is updated. So let's just use this, and we want to put a car using the Postman. So it will be, there will be no problem, and I think but I want to show you that it's good. We can just use it like this, and let's just say added by Postman, change this to updated by Postman, and I can just update this. And updated by Postman, and now if I get my all articles, so we can just say try it out, execute, and you can see that this is updated in the first time, and this is updated by Postman. Now let's work on our last operation, that is deleting the article. So let's just copy this at app.pod, and we can just grab it in here. So now in the response model, this time we're not going to use a pydentic article pydentic, because we're not going to return anything, but we can just add a status message in here. We can create a new pydentic class in here. So first I need to import that, and I can just say, or we can say from pydentic import, we want base model, so base model, and now we can create our class, and we can just call it status, and it extends from the base model. And now we can add a message, so the message's type is tr. Okay, now we will use this status according to the response model for our article, for the deleting of the article. So instead of article pydentic, we want to use status that we have newly created. Now after doing this, now if there was an error, we can just say http not found error. For example, if there was the ID that the ID is not exist, we can use this. So, and now let's just create a sync diff delete article, and we want to delete according to the specific ID, so we can just add ID integer, And so now you can just say deleted article, or you can say deleted count, and you can just say await filter. So await article dot filter, and we want to filter according to the ID and ID. So now we can check if not deleted article. So we can just raise HTTP exception. So HTTP exception, and we can add the status code in here. So a status code, it's status dot or HTTP. So we haven't imported this, I think. Yeah, we need to import this in here, and let's just add this dot, or even you can use it like this, and also you can add it manually. For example, I can do it like this, so a status code, for example 404, and there's no problem. But if you want to make it dynamically, you can just use status dot, and I think it is 404 not found, and this is raise. And also in here we can just use it dot delete because we want to delete the data. And also we can add a message for this, for example detail, and we can just say if a string user ID not found, and in the else case we can just return our status that we have created, and we can add our message in here that if string deleted article, so it's not user, sorry, it's article, and deleted article, and we can just add the ID in here. So now also we need to change this to delete. Now let's check our last operation, deleting, that it's working or not. And so we have our delete, and we want to delete the article that has ID 1, and let's just execute. Yeah, deleted article 1. And now if we get all the articles and try it out, execute, so we don't have that article yet, and we have just ID 2. And for example, if I add an article that does not exist, for example article 3, and if I execute, so you can see that deleted, or we shouldn't see this article 3 deleted. Let's just refresh this. And let's just click on the delete. For example, if I say ID 5, and if I click on the execute, so deleted article 5, I'm receiving this. Let's check that why we should not receive this 200. Okay, so you can see in here we're receiving 200. Okay, in the response body. So guys, you can see that this is it's delete article. We have deleted article in here, so we need to just make this deleted article. And now, for example, ID 5, if I execute, and you can see article 5 not found because we don't have this article in here. Let's just try this with a postman and the last operation. And for example, if I say ID 5, and for example, let me change this to put to delete, and let's just send. So article 5 not found, but I have article 2 and I want to delete that. Send. So deleted article 2, and now if we check this again, if we get, try it out, execute. Now, so you can see response body is empty because we don't have any article in here. So if I say article warm article, so now you can see we have just ID, title, and also description.